Back in 2018, I created a video on how I organize files and folders for design and development clients. There's still value to that video, but I think it's time for an update. So there's no right or wrong way to go about file organization. As long as you can find what you're looking for quickly, you're good. But your system will get its biggest test when you can find a particular file several weeks or even months after finishing a project. So before I dive in, just know that this is what works for me. If you get something out of it, awesome. If not, that's cool too. Okay, let's go over my current folder structure. Feel free to use it as a starting point, but don't be afraid to adapt it as you see fit. And be sure to stick around to the end for a pro tip on how to get this set up in literal seconds. As you'll see, my structure is mostly broken down into phases, and while I focus on web design here, the concepts can be applied to other design disciplines. I've certainly done that when I've had logo design projects, for example. So you're going to want to start with the client name, which is usually, but not always, the company name. Use that for the client folder name. For this example, we're going to go with Acme Corp. In the main client folder, we'll create two folders to start with, the admin folder and the first project folder. Now, I say first project folder because if you're lucky enough to have clients stick with you over the years, you'll inevitably have a new project to add to this client folder. All right, the admin folder gets labeled like so, 00 client code admin. So for Acme Corp, the folder is 00 Acme admin. The 00 is to keep this folder at the very top above all project folders. You'll notice that I put Acme in all caps, and that's the client code or the abbreviation for the client that I came up with for this example. If the company was called Mitch and Murray, I might use M&M as the client code. My general guideline is to keep the client code between 3 and 5 characters, with 5 being used as rarely as possible. 4 is ideal. The project folder gets labeled similarly, but has an additional 2 digits. It goes like this, 01-24 project name. The 01 is for the sequential project number, which also matches up with the project SOW or scope of work, which is the contract for the project. At least that's the case for me. The 24 is the last 2 digits of the year that the project started. This keeps all projects in chronological order. All right, now let's dive into the contents of the project folder. The first subfolder is the admin folder. Again, to keep things in a specific order, I use a number at the front. This admin folder will contain anything that's specific to the project, but isn't part of the creative process, such as the contract, expense receipts, or even discovery documents. Next up, we have the assets folder. This contains any assets not created by me. These will be photos, logos, videos, and other files provided by the client or downloaded from a stock website. I try to keep the assets organized in folders by type or source. For example, any stock images I might download, I'll put into a stock photos folder, or text copy provided by the client may go into a copy or text folder. Next, we have the UX UI folder. This is where any UX files such as sitemaps or wireframes go, as well as any UI files. Now, you could split this up into 2 folders if you have an extensive UX process or the project warrants it. If there's a need, what I'll typically do is create 2 subfolders, one for UX and one for UI. One thing about UI files I should know. Because I work in Figma, the native files live, well, in Figma. Duh. So what this folder will contain generally is PDF exports of the designs from each review round that I send to the client. That's mainly for posterity and possibly for portfolio or case study material. At the end of the UI phase, I'll save a copy of the native Figma file with the date stamp. This is also why I typically keep UX and UI files in this single folder. The next folder is dev or development. And to be honest, I don't keep much in here since the site code will live elsewhere during development. A video for another time. But depending on the project, I will drop any third-party code in here for posterity. Sometimes I'll also throw in a zipped up copy of the old site just in case, because you never know. For most sites that I build for clients, I'll create a user guide so that they can get started managing their site right away. I host that user guide on Notion, but any assets I create for that, such as screenshots or videos, go in this user guide folder. And finally, we have the showcase folder. This will hold screenshots, time lapses, and other assets of the project itself that I gather along the way for a possible future portfolio item or case study. When the project is finished, I'll move this folder into a separate location where I keep all of my portfolio pieces. If for some reason I don't need this folder, I simply delete it. You may have noticed that the number for this folder is 10 instead of 06. The reason for that is in case I need to add any other folders after the deb folder but before the showcase folder. It's only happened once or twice, but it's good to do so that this showcase folder stays at the very bottom. All right, so one quick note about file naming. Use dates whenever possible. It just adds another layer of organization to your files and makes things easier to scan and search later on. I typically name files like so: the 6-digit date, 2-digit year, month, and date, and the file name. Simple as that. Okay, you've made it this far, so now it's time for that pro tip that I mentioned earlier. As you've no doubt guessed, creating this folder structure for projects every single time would be a massive time suck, especially when you compound it over time. One way people handle this is to create an empty version of this that they just copy and rename. But I like to go a step further that I think is just as fast, if not faster. I use an app called Posthaste. It takes a little bit of setup at first, but once you have the template ready to go, it's just a matter of entering the project name and choosing where to save the project folder. All right, that does it for this video. Got any questions? Let me know in the comments. See you in the next one and have a good one.